Hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil by Mike King. Tonight is choir practice. And you know what? We've been thinking a lot lately, and we feel like we had to kind of shift a little bit. We were starting to get a little too programmatic, and choir practice isn't about programming. It's about kicking back and having a little fun. And tonight we're going to do that. And before I bring in my guests, I want to just shout out to all of you. Thank you, those that were able to join today when we looked at the Daybell hearing and the possibility of a brand new prosecutor coming in.
Hey, everyone. I think we lost Mike for a second. Sorry about that. I'm Skylar from the back office, so it's good to see everyone here. Mike is down in a different part of the state working on some stuff this week, so his internet's a little spotty, and we've been trying to get it updated up there. So while we wait for him, Tyler, maybe we ought to just play the video right now while we wait for him. Oh, looks like he's back. So Mike is back. So we're going to give it back to him.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Thanks a lot, Skylar. I switched over to a different internet, and hopefully that will solve the problem tonight. But where I was saying that we're gonna kick back a little bit. We're going to talk about some things. I want to thank all of you who joined today earlier, and call out some of you who are online tonight, especially thanks to our mods who step in night after night and help out, and even at the last minute today helped out. So Barb Nauman, Miss Sophia, Mimi J2, Nicole Marletti, thanks everybody, Angelita Cisneros. It's funny. She says she practically force-fed her husband to get her here on time. I think that's a theme tonight. The sheriff, I think, was force-feeding himself so that he had a little time. Folks, just a reminder, the Profiling Evil podcast, if you haven't subscribed to it, we would welcome you and invite you to do that. The Mapping Evil with Mike King podcast launched its 4th episode today. About 2-3 hours ago, and that particular episode is called Twilight Zones, and it deals with a series of interviews that I did with serial offenders whose preferential victim was elderly women. So it was serial killers who only sexually assaulted and murdered elderly women. So it's and then we'll be looking at a case down under, and I think you'll enjoy it. So go to Mapping Evil by Mike King and Profiling Evil. But let's get rolling. Heck, let's bring on Michelle McPhee and Sheriff Ryan Arbin. You met both of them before, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you all about them, other than reminding you that Michelle McPhee was on with Commissioner Ed Davis of the Boston Police Department a few nights ago. We talked about the Boston Marathon bombing and the reporting that she did on that, and frankly, the amazing investigative reporting that she did, identifying that there still is one offender that's probably out there, the bomb maker. Michelle, welcome aboard.
It's so great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. And I understand the dog has been put into quarantine.
Actually, I think that somebody might have gave him some like peanut butter laced with CBC or something. CBD.
That's fantastic. Sheriff Arbin, welcome back.
Thank you. How are you guys? Good to see you.
So you're I can tell you're sitting in the office up at the sheriff's office. I'm where you were last week. I'm down this week for Chiefs meetings, And I thought maybe we'd see you here because Thursday, I think, it's the sheriff's meetings as well. But it's great to have you both here. There's been some wacky stuff going on in the news lately. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of that tonight, just kind of explore it. But Michelle, we have 3 copies of your book to give away tonight. Thank you so much for making those available to the Profiling Evil family. And if you're interested in getting Michelle's book, folks, 3 lucky winners are going to get that thing tonight. So head over to profilingevil.com/giveaway and fill out the form. And we're going to be doing the drawing from those who fill it out tonight. By signing up, you'll be able to get the Bolo newsletter. And you don't want to miss the Bolo this week. We're going to be talking about that really complex kidnapping case of Daphne Westbrook. And if you haven't looked into Daphne's kidnapping, this started out, Sheriff, as a custody issue. She was sent with her dad a year and a half ago, and dad disappeared with her. And this 16-year-old is gone now without school for a year. He's been flitting around the countryside. How do you generally handle a case like that? Because these custody cases are a mess.
Yeah, the custody cases are a mess. I mean, the problem is in my case, or in the cases we've dealt with, is there's so many sides to the story. And you always have one that says commits to one, and then they commit to another. And sometimes you find out that there was actually permission given, but during this permission, this time to go away, that the person got upset and wants to rescind it, but no one's telling anybody. And they start using the kids as leverage. Sometimes the parents see that the kid's in danger and that this is the only way to save them. Could be for personal reasons, it could be for selfish reasons, but these are tough cases. I mean, it's hard. And to track them down once they've been gone for some time, oh boy, I mean, they change phones, they change addresses, they're very low profile, but they're tough. They are very hard.
Yeah. Michelle, how do you even begin to decide when to report on a case like this? Because, 90% of these kids are going to just come home out of a normal course of action. But the fact that we're going hours or days without doing anything because we think they're going to return home really increases the chances or decreases the chances of finding them.
Well, what's interesting is that, I find in my experience about writing about missing kids, 16 is that, I don't know, that's the line where you might get an eye roll or they're probably a runaway. I mean, just this week in Anaheim, not far from Disney, California came in and swept up one of the many, many, many homeless encampments that are all over Los Angeles, all over Southern California. And not only did they find drugs and needles, they found 3 missing children in one homeless encampment. So were they missing? Were they runaways? Did they go off on their own accord? Are they being trafficked? There's so many different elements that you have to look at with a story like this. Sadly, most of the time when it's one of these custody cases with a dad, you very often find out that the kid hasn't survived. This is sort of a retribution case where, especially with the younger kids, and you'll find unfortunately, there's nothing sadder, and as you both know, than a case involving a dead child. Yeah. But that's always the fear, I think. And I usually see that with younger kids, but that's usually the fear. I'm sure you both agree.
Sheriff, we were on the phone the other day with a young woman who was involved as a victim extended of a case that your office handled many, many years ago. I mean, when you think back, what are the cases that have really stuck with you?
In terms of like runaways and missing, or just cases in general?
Yeah, or maybe just a case in general.
Well, the cases like you're seeing a trend in law enforcement where peer support is becoming a big factor. And so when you think of terms of things, what do you remember the most? And it's interesting. A colleague and I were talking today that when we come upon an unattended death, and usually if it's an older individual, those seem to be common and not so, it doesn't affect the officer. But when it affects someone in their 30s or 40s, where maybe the officer's the same age, it causes a great reflection on, they still have life left, and where am I at, and what happens if my life ends right now? What have I accomplished? And then the impact is even greater when you're dealing with little kids and you see them as so innocent, and there's so much life ahead of them. Luckily those are few and far between. But one of the cases that impact me quite a bit is there was in one of the previous agencies I worked, there was a case where a girl's internal temperature, she was still alive, she was about 75 degrees, and her parents were forcing her to stay outside, and ultimately she passed on. But you think, what impacts you, and how does it get so bad? Like, why do kids run away, or are they missing, or did they flee with somebody? Sometimes it's hard to tell, but it's heartbreaking. It's tough. It really is. So that's just one case that I remember. When I was in another agency, it was difficult.
Yeah, that's terrible. Well, I've been watching and been really interested in the last week as we've watched the events unfold around the Atlanta spa massage parlor shootings and that particular set of homicides. And just to kind of remind everybody, on March 16th, this guy, Robert Long, went to 3 different massage parlors and kills 8 people. 6 of those end up being Asian women. And there's been a real interesting thing going on right now across the country, because we have these horrendous homicide crimes, Sheriff, and then we have this demand that we all should have, that if there is a hate crime involved, there should be aggravation added onto it. But as you look at a case like that, how do you keep your detectives focused on first solving a homicide case and letting that other stuff come in as it should?
Well, Mike, I'm sure that, and Michelle, as you guys know very well, what makes a good officer, especially a good detective, and it's just staying focused. If you believe in all the hype, if you read the newspapers and you allow that stuff to affect your investigation, it's problematic. But most officers don't do that. They have a goal, and they want to find the truth. And that's what's awesome about law enforcement, is here you have a situation in Georgia, and there's all kinds of speculation, but you can't find the ultimate truth within a few days or even a few weeks. It takes a long process to get all the facts. And we're in a society or culture now that they want the decisions, they want the judgment, they want it all right now. And they'll make those decisions just on in some cases, the headline of a story. But sometimes these cases involving homicides can take up to a year or even more. But it's so important to find the facts. That's the ultimate goal, is to find the truth. It just takes time.
Yeah, and Michelle, I hope you'll just interrupt tonight, and Ryan the same. Let's just ask each other questions. But I wonder, Michelle, from a journalist perspective, how do you measure that fine line between what is going to really ramp up the public and get them buying newspapers versus what is responsible reporting to kind of drive and help the community evolve through a story?
Well, we talked about this a little bit before the show aired. I mean, one of the disappointing things for me to watch is the rush to judgment in journalism. And you have reporters who have zero rapport with the sheriff's detectives, because I think the sheriff made a very good point. I've covered cops in multiple departments all over the country. I've worked out of one police plaza for a decade. I covered Boston police for a long time, and I've parachuted in on big national crime stories. And the last thing you want to do is jump to conclusions. And there's all this public pressure now on reporters, young reporters who are making no money. They're getting tons of pressure from, unexperienced editors to get that tweet out, to be the first. And that was the opposite of the way that I was brought into this business. It was to get it right, not get it first. And you can't get it right if people don't trust you. The minute you write a bad story, and I'm sure you both had experience with this, the minute you're dealing with a reporter who gets it wrong, you're not likely to share intel or behind the scenes or off the record or on background conversations with that reporter. So now they have no sources. In fact, there's probably a somewhat of a combative relationship going on, and yet they still think that they have some insight into the way the investigation is going. It's dangerous. I think it's really dangerous, and I think it's just adding to the culture of this anger towards policing. This guy's a nutbag. Who knows why he did it? He's just a nutbag. There could be a million reasons why. He couldn't, his mother might have said something rude to him that morning. We just don't know. And there's a series of events that take a look. I've been doing the Boston Marathon for 8 years. I still don't have all the answers. It's
there you go.
It's just about investigating.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Mike, can I add something?
Sure. Yeah.
So when Salt Lake was having the protests that turned into riots, and this happens in other cities too, in like situations, but they called out a valley-wide 1033, which is emergency help, and a lot of us responded from the Wasatch Front to help them out. And so when we saw this happen, we thought, what can we do to get ahead of the curve? So staff and I here at Weber County Sheriff's Office, we took a field trip, if you will, and flew up to Portland. And we're, some people consider the epicenter of where all protests. I mean, there's one of the longest histories. And we got to meet their chief and actually all their chiefs and see how they operate. But what we learned up there was very interesting is we hear the term InfoWars. And so I usually hear that with fake news on the big media sites. But what we saw on an InfoWar up there in Portland is, for example, there'd be a protest going on and the police department was trying to protect the public and let them know where there might be traffic problems or some kind of criminal behavior. So they'd announce out there on Facebook or wherever it was what's going on. And then these groups were so organized that they would fire off so many messages to counter and say, oh, that's not true. That's not happening. And so you see this war of information getting out. And what you learn is if it's simply printed or put on the website, people believe it. There's hardly a vetting process of almost anything these days. There's the mature and ones like, you, Mike, and Michelle, we've been around a while and we understand, but we have the patience to wait for the real story. Most people can't wait. And it's unfortunate. And what that does is it creates what Michelle was saying is this culture and this problematic. So when you do have a problem, you're going to have spillover or a boiling point, and it creates more problems. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, agreed. Folks,
what happened to the riot when you had, the initial reports identifying a guy wearing a fire department hat, and he is blamed across the country for throwing because what better headline? Fire, racist firefighter throws a fire hydrant and kills a police officer. And it wasn't true. And you don't even see any retraction whatsoever about this guy whose face has been all over the country, who was not guilty of what he was accused of. I mean, that's the danger. Like, what if somebody tried to go after that guy for something you didn't do?
Yeah, that's amazing, folks. I'm talking with Sheriff Ryan Arbin, Weber County, Utah Sheriff, and Michelle McPhee, author, journalist, and radio talk show host. And Michelle, I know you just every time I talk to you, you're either in Boston or you're in LA. I mean, you are so busy, and the fact that you take time just is so meaningful to me. Thank you so much. But you made it possible for us to give away 3 copies of your book tonight. And I'd like to just have the back office get ready to pull up a book here. And folks, this is who you can thank is Michelle McPhee. But if you're interested in getting a book, you go to profilingevil.com/giveaway and fill out the form. You'll not only get on for the book tonight, but you'll also get the bolo, and hopefully it's going to be somebody from the United States, because when I mail something overseas, it's like $40 just to mail it. So we're gonna hope that that it's somebody in the U.S. And that's no ding on all you wonderful folks that are calling in from overseas. But let's see, Tyler, can you pop up from the back office, or I just want to say, I'm getting waved off here. We also started, we're going to give, pull up who's the winner of the book. Let's see that. So first winner is Danielle Ruth. I hope I said that right, Danielle, and make sure that you email immediately profilingevil@gmail.com, and the back office will get it. The back office will get it and send that off to you. And folks, the back office came up with this greatest thing, because I have an amazing family member that watches this show faithfully, that knows that I have an addiction to Dr. Pepper, and she actually sent a donation to the Profiling Evil Diet Dr. Pepper Fund. Darcy Hand 66. Thank you so much. We're gonna actually keep this up. The guys thought this would be great. We're gonna run this. This way I can buy the back office Cokes and take care of them. So any of you that want to donate to the Diet Dr. Pepper Fund, we'll make sure to call you out, and the back office would appreciate it. And my continued addiction to Diet Dr. Pepper will be satisfied. So thanks a lot. Hey, in the back office, by the way, Sheriff Michelle, they're going to pop up any questions that they think they'd like to ask or have asked as we go along. But I want to, as we're talking about this event in Atlanta, a couple things I read as I've done some research on this that I found pretty important and pretty interesting. One is the question about whether this is a hate crime focused at Asian Americans, Asians, or if it is, as the offender said in his testimony to law enforcement, as a result of his sexual addiction. And people are having a hard time buying that. But I found something really pretty interesting. The church that he was belonging to about 2 years ago, he was baptized into an evangelical Christian group. And there's a video online of him proclaiming his baptism and other kinds of things. So we see this emerging kind of war that he's got going on between his desire for religion and doing what's right. But now some things are unfolding. His testimony that this was because of a sex addiction. But what we also learned today was that he had been attending therapy for his sex addiction. So there's something additional to that to add to this mix. And I'm not going to say one way or another. I don't know whether it's a hate crime or not. It certainly was specific toward Asians who were working in spas. But again, that becomes aggravating factors, in my opinion, Sheriff. It's a homicide that first and foremost needs to be investigated. But here's the question I got for you, Sheriff, is what we've now learned is that he went to a local sporting goods store just hours before he committed the homicide and purchased a 9mm. So Georgia is a state that doesn't have a mandatory waiting period on the purchase of weapons. Some people are going to really push hard because of that. Others are going to say there should never be a waiting period. I don't know. What are your thoughts as a sheriff?
Well, my thoughts, number one, is always public safety. That's the utmost priority. But the second thing is how do you obtain that? Where's the risk involved in creating a law or something that may take away someone's constitutional rights? I got a lot of friends in Georgia. I don't have any that are legislators by any means, but Georgia seems like a pretty good, conservative, smart state. And I'm sure that these elected officials have created those laws in such a way that they felt it was the right move. But to blame a law like that for the crime, or to blame the gun, I think goes too far and is too big of a stretch. You can get guns just about anywhere. If they're for sale on Facebook, the neighbor could have one. It could have been, if you didn't have a gun, it could have been something else. But to blame the process in any form of getting the gun, I think is just too far. To go that route. I just don't believe it's the right thing to do. I think a good detective or investigator is going to try and do his best to look into his background and history and really find the motive for all of this, to what really is the reason behind these killings, whether they be targeted against Asians or not. That's something that's going to have to come out later in the process. But back to the guns, I think people have the right constitutionally to own and right to bear arms. I just don't think if they're going to go after and blame that industry or those laws, I think that's going to be tough. Yeah,
Michelle, I think of all the years you spent covering like Brooklyn North homicide and all of, I mean, probably one of the toughest parts of town in the country, square footage wise. The number of homicides that get there. And part of me swings to this point that says, yeah, but if he would have had to wait 2 or 3 days and he didn't buy it on Facebook, would he have got his senses about him and maybe had a cool down period? I've gotten in trouble, Sheriff, because I've said on this show before, I was raised in a hunting family. I own guns. I love being able to go out and shoot and be able to own a gun. In the same light, I don't know that it bothers me that much if I had to wait 3 days to get a gun that I really wanted to purchase. And I wonder sometimes if there's a middle ground where we can, without putting the Constitution at risk, be able to start providing a little bit of a buffer. I don't know, Michelle, what are your thoughts?
Well, in all the stories I've written, the majority of them involve an illegal gun. Even the Boston Marathon bombers, when they executed MIT police officer Sean Collier, they had borrowed a gun from a drug dealer along with food for the dog, which was what they referred to the bullets as. I'm thinking of so many mass shootings. The bigger issue is, I think, the mandating reporting. Like, how many people knew that this guy was a wackadoodle? Who in his life knew that he was going to therapy and he had the sex addiction, he had problems that didn't let anybody know? Because what infuriates me more is the example of the Pulse nightclub shooter, where the gun shop owner made a call to the FBI that wasn't followed up upon, saying that here's a guy that came in who was acting shady. He bought a ton of ammunition. He bought a bulletproof vest and a gun. And that lead wasn't followed up upon. I think is more terrifying than, I get you with the middle ground. I really do. And I think that, a 24-hour waiting period. But if you're dealing with somebody with mental illness or somebody who is off the charts crazy to begin with, who knows what he would have done? I think the sheriff pointed out he could have gotten it from a neighbor, get it from a gangbanger, get it from someone's garage. Like, if somebody wants to commit violence, it's the person that commits the violence, not the weapon.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to solve this one today, but that's one of the big things that's out there. And I think that we have to somehow find a way for both sides of this channel of this issue to talk and talk through, because that's one thing I just don't think we do enough in this country is talk through and try to understand each other's position on things like this. But I want to kind of make a little bit more of a shift, and I want to just loosen up a little bit. And Sheriff, I asked you to kind of dig into the old archives of something that's past the statute of limitations that you had happen in your career that would be just kind of fun to chat about. What came to mind when you were thinking about that?
Well, it's funny is one of the questions, like, what happened in your career that got you excited, or a favorite case? But I remember towards the end of high school, I did a ride along with one of the local police officers in Pleasant View, Utah. His name was Tom Louder, and loved the man to death. He's retired. But it was a small town, probably 4,000 at that time, and there was shots fired down by a golf course. And just being young, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the biggest thing in the world. And so as we're heading down to the golf course, there was another officer that pulled up, and I had to ask the question. I said, what are you going to do? And he said, and he pulls out his gun and he holds it like this. And I'm thinking, well, he's already got it out. I mean, I couldn't explain. I was just, holy cow, this is real. And I go, what if you get shot? And he real calmly looked at me holding his gun. He looked at me and he pointed to this button on the dash. He says, if I get hurt or you hear shots, push that button. There's a shotgun in the trunk. Come get me. I thought, oh my gosh, here's an 18-year-old that's supposed to come rescue a cop with a shotgun. And he was serious. And I thought that was the coolest story. I mean, everything happened. I probably told 1,000 people what happened, but it was fun. And that's what got me started in this profession, is that's what I wanted to do. So yeah, it was fun.
That cracks me up because you're saying this old guy named Tom Louder, who actually I worked with in patrol for many years.
Well, to save a little face, to me, when I was 18, anybody over 25 was old. And I don't mean that derogatory, but Tom's been in the business for about 20 years, 25 years then. And I always thought he was, still is awesome guy, but boy, that was fun. That was fun.
Well, so without asking or without saying his name, did you ever work with another officer out in that same triplex that everyone called Shaky Bob?
I'll just say we'll leave it at Shaky Bob.
So Michelle, I was thinking the other night of one of the craziest things I had one night, and I was working patrol in the city on a graveyard shift, and there was an aggravated robbery, and the suspects drove by me just the moment the call came out. And so I flipped on the lights, and it was right down behind your downtown jail, Sheriff, right on Grand Avenue, 2500 block. And I flipped on the lights, and this guy lit up his vehicle. I mean, he went into overdrive, and the streets were full because it was a Friday night. And he went up onto the sidewalk on Grand Avenue and was going down the sidewalk at about 60 miles an hour. And they were throwing money out the windows of the car as they were driving. And I was right on their tail on this sidewalk. And we had this guy named Freddie that worked at the PD then. Michelle, I'm telling this because he was from Boston. And he
did he have an accent as bad as mine?
Oh, he sounded just like you. And he'd get on the radio, and especially when he got ramped up, and he just became a Bostonian, complete with some of the vocabulary that Bostonians have been known to use. And I'm on this guy's tail, and he's throwing money out, and people are jumping on the money, trying to pick up the money, and I'm radioing that these people are grabbing money and to get downtown and collect the evidence. And then these guys start shooting out the window, and it's like a television program. And I'll be dang, Freddie, his name was Freddie Dexter, and anybody that worked at the city would know him. Freddie T-boned the guy, slammed into him, and crashed him into a building. And he calmly got on the radio and he said, "Dispatch, the pursuits ended with a slight ramification." And that was the end of it. Of course, those guys were so beat up by the crash that they were quickly subdued. But
that sounds like a Boston guy thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I don't know if you noticed, but while we've been talking, I was Michelle Leonardo just threw some money toward the Dr. Pepper Fund, and Nicole Marie just put in that she carries pepper spray with her, but she's going to make sure that there's some Dr. Pepper for the team. So woohoo!
That is great.
Michelle, what was the craziest story you handled with our buddies from Brooklyn North homicide?
Oh, Brooklyn North. Okay. Well, I was the first female police bureau chief working out of One Police Plaza, which you've all seen on Law and Order a million times. And there was
And who was PC at the time? Who was police commissioner?
I worked under Howard Safer, who was there for a minute. Then Ray Kelly, who was one of the best police commissioners I think the country has ever seen. That is a guy who has truly kept us safe from terrorism. Because I
love Ray Kelly. And the next time we do choir practice, I'll be at home. And folks, look over my shoulder because there's a picture of me with Commissioner Kelly at an awards dinner when he gave me something many years ago. But I love Ray Kelly. Yeah.
Ray Kelly is one of the best in the business because after 9/11, the first thing he said was, it's not if, it's when. And he created his own international terrorist interdiction unit, which very few people know about. But he tapped the best NYP detectives in his department and sent them overseas where they're to this day embedded, and very reliable intel because he was sick and tired of what we've all, discussed many, many times. It's intel sharing. He was sick of the lack thereof, and he created his own thing. And I give him so much credit for keeping us all safe as a nation because of the hard work that he did. So I worked under Ray Kelly. And then who came in after Kelly?
It would have been Bratton.
Bratton. Yeah, Bratton. So they both overlapped a little bit. And I know Bill Bratton from Boston, but Bill Bratton is another good Boston guy, good cop, good history. He had that very famous fight with the former mayor, Rudy Giuliani, and kind of like beat back home. But so I worked under great commissioners at 1PP. But of course, you have to have an initiation. So there was a massacre at a Wendy's restaurant in Queens, in the middle of nowhere, Queens, in a bad neighborhood. And first of all, if you're from Boston and you're trying to find anything in Queens, and this is long before GPS and cell phones, you had a payphone, and you had like an old map, like one of those driving around maps. Most people don't even know what they look like now. And trying to find something in Queens was a horror show. It would be like 137th Street, 0.7 Avenue plus 37. Like it was horrible. Queens was awful. And I used to cry. But I get out to the scene and I'm new and I'm just got this job. And a cop gave me a quote. And I said, what's your name? And he goes, Haywood Jablamy. Now, put that in writing, folks. Write it down and see who really got quoted in the New York Daily News in print. Fast forward 20 years, and I'm writing a TV show. I work for that show, City on a Hill, where starring Kevin Bacon on Showtime, and we made a character whose name was that character that the cop. Because I still didn't know, even when I saw it in print, it didn't look like what it sounds like, right? But he still helped me. But the next day, a cop came up to me in the hallway of 1PP and was like, "Hey," and said it, and I was like, "What?" Horrified. Like this is long before you could get canceled for that kind of thing. And I got totally, initiated. That's it. Now you're one of us.
That's fantastic. So, Sheriff, I want you to think about another story, and we're going to give away a book right now. So, Michelle. We actually had, you gave me two books that are both on the Tsarnaev brothers and the Boston Marathon bombing. One is Mayhem. Tell quickly about the other book and why you felt like you needed two of them.
Okay, so the first book came out. It was called Maximum Harm. It was the hardcover edition of this book. And I didn't feel like the answers were all there yet. When the book came out, and I'm sure you both have familiarity with this, once you become angry. And I think what prompted a lot of police officers to help me and to guide me and to, they didn't come up and give me information they weren't supposed to give me. But I'm sure you both are aware of like dropping crumbs or showing me with the string I might want to pull. And I'm very grateful to the law enforcement officers who did that. And that was primarily because of the murder of Sean Collier that we mentioned that happened 3 days after the Boston Marathon attacks. He was a young MIT police officer, just weeks away from his dream job of joining the police force in his hometown city of Somerville, Massachusetts. He is There's a lot of confusing intelligence about what happened that night. You know, the FBI was on surveillance, then they claimed they weren't on surveillance. There were fights between the Cambridge Police Department and the FBI that night. And in the end, Sean Collier was killed. So I think that when the book came out, the first Maximum Harm, cops were angry enough to start giving me new leads. And those new leads led me to this mystery of who built the Boston bombs. Because during this denial of trial, the prosecutor said they didn't believe that the brothers built the bombs. The FBI's own bomb experts from Quantico said that they didn't have any evidence that they built the bombs, which I think raises the immediate question, then if they didn't, who did? And 55 days after the marathon, there was a man, you know, arrested after an altercation with his mom.
And I'm gonna stop you there because I thought that was the most compelling thing I read, and frankly, I want people to go buy this book and read it, because what you were leading up to right now to me is like the linchpin. Yeah, it's the linchpin. So, folks, let's see who won book number 2, Mimi Dominguez. So great, Mimi, please email immediately, profilingevil@gmail.com, and the back office will get your information so we can mail that book out to you. And Michelle, thanks again for doing that. I mean, you didn't have to do something like that, and that's just so awesome that you would. Thank you.
I think the world of you, and I'm loving your book, by the way. I'm almost done. It's keeping me up.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah,
Good. I haven't heard how far the sheriff is on it yet, but I know that one day he'll let me know. But Sheriff, give me another story. I got to build my skeleton closet on you so that when I need something out of you, I can remind you.
Your Hoover files.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this next story will fit that category, but most recently, I thought this was worth sharing. That, you know, in the climate and the culture we're in, we're under the microscope. You know, there's this police reform culture, and there's still in each of us, there's this, you know, what's the right thing to do. So when I told you earlier about the Salt Lake protest, where they sent out an emergency call for all agencies to help, send whatever you got. So our staffing levels, max, when we're topped out with everybody, we're almost 400, but at the time we were probably around 370 employees. And so about 40 are staff in the office. But when we asked our supervisors to find out who's willing to go down to Salt Lake all suited up, it was amazing. Not one of our employees was asked. It was all volunteer. They wanted to go down and ensure that their First Amendment rights were protected. They wanted to make sure that the person was free to protest peaceably, but they were also there to protect property. And so from our office, the first night, within 2 hours of the call, we were en route to Salt Lake, which is about 40 minutes or so, with 24 and then 20 later after midnight. All in all, from the county itself, from some of the support agencies, 220, with one night from our office, 61 went down and helped them for about 7-8 hours. None of them were asked. They were just like, I'm not working, or I'm coming in. And it was just so inspiring to see the willingness, despite what's going on, all the cameras, the media attention, they suited up because they felt they wanted to protect people's rights. I mean, that's just cool. That's just awesome.
That is amazing. And what an interesting thing to want so badly to protect that right and then be the target of the negative aggression that happens in some of those situations, and yet still try to work toward doing that. It's amazing when I see the officers that are physically harmed while they're trying to give people that right.
Yep. One of the coolest things about that event is we happened to have our public relations individual here, and they were filming us as we were heading out in our caravan. And while we were going down there, it was really neat because someone in the public saw it and said, go ahead and take care of business. We'll cover you while you're gone. So the public is like go take care of it. We'll cover you. I mean, who does that? So awesome. Such good people up here. So I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Another reason I love Utah. I love Utah. It's one of the most beautiful states in the country. I drove through it twice this year. It's stunning. But that sounds like a great community.
It is.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And, you know, I think back to the last couple of years and the peace officers that have died in the line of duty. And this is something you see that's very unique in rural America and in the normal size mid-city, mid-counties in America, Michelle. And that is like recently a police officer was killed as he was looking as he was on a front porch of a house at a domestic violence. And, you know, the police department that he came from is about 140 officers who wanted to be there for their comrade at that funeral. And Sheriff, you ended up taking all of the city calls, everything else, and came in. I mean, talk a little bit about what the real truth of mutual aid is when something ugly like that happens. Because, you know, I think of that. I think of Frankham when he was killed. 6 police officers, Michelle, on a dope deal, shot. 1 dies, and that was a multiple agencies that were involved. The sheriff's office and a consortium of about 10 agencies. But anyway, Sheriff, talk about that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this is most other agencies, but when there's a call over the radio that there's an officer down, there's no question what you're doing. There's probably nothing else more important than anything. You drop everything and everybody goes. And it's cool is that, you know, the unfortunate incident where, you know, that officer that you're talking about was there to protect an individual, a female, if you will, because of report of abuse. And he was just trying to find facts. And then, you know, he got killed. Didn't know it was coming. It was behind the door type deal. But when that happened, it was not what, you know, can you tell us, you know, Chief Watt at the time, what can we do or how can I help you? It's like, we're here, just tell us where to go. And it's just to see all those agencies. And it wasn't just our agency, but there was a lot of agencies. I think there were some cities from other counties that came in, and for, I think it was 24 or 48 hours, we handled all the calls within that city. So the officers could do what they need to do for their fallen partner. I mean, it was just neat to see that. And when you think about it too, Mike and Michelle, I mean, what noble professions are left to these days? There ain't very many. And when it's this noble and important, you see a strong brotherhood, if you will, come together and unite. And it's for good things, support, and we've got to have that. But it was neat, awesome to see.
That's a beautiful story. You know, it reminds me of something that a police commander told me when I first started covering cops. And he said, you have to remember there's no such thing as a routine call. No such thing. Because this seems like an ordinary 911 call for a domestic, a traffic stop, the most dangerous thing for a police officer. And, you know, seeing cops step up and self-deploy is not a surprise to me at all. It goes back to what I'm saying earlier. If people entrenched themselves, anybody who wants to write about police or crime or terrorism, they have to entrench themselves in that world. And in big cities and little cities, you know, cops have each other's backs. And I've been to a million times, as we call them in Boston, where someone's, you know, child has cancer and we have a fundraiser, or, you know, who's out injured and they're going to build an addition on their house. And this is not unusual. Like those stories that you're talking about where you took over an entire department so that the department could, you know, say goodbye to their fallen brethren. I think that that's the norm. And I'm not surprised that you behaved like that, but it's such a beautiful thing. And that's the part of policing that people doesn't get covered and people don't realize. And I really believe that anyone who wants to write about cops or be a journalist and follow in that beat, which is a beat, you have to live it. They need to do a ride along. They need to understand cops. They have to hang around cop bars. They have to try to make friends with people. Then you write the stories. You earn the trust, you gain the respect, and then you write the stories. Because there's more stories like that. like your department and stepping up than there are of the George Floyd dirtbag that not one of us sitting here is going to ever defend. I don't know one cop who's going to defend what happened and what we all saw for 8 minutes. I don't know anybody who's going to say that's the right thing. Nobody that I know in law enforcement said, boy, that guy got it right. Nobody.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I love the fact you brought up George Floyd because it reminded me of something that I need to talk about, Michelle, and that is Vinnie Politan from Court TV has been so kind. I think I've done, I don't know, in the last 4 months, maybe 20 Court TV appearances, and he had me on recently to talk about the jury selection in the Derek Chauvin case, which is the officer accused of kneeling on Floyd. And he talked about how perfectly timed the release of the $27 million civil settlement was, and how it's impacting the jury pool and making it difficult for Chauvin to get a fair trial. Vinnie, we actually did a podcast with him this week, and it's on right now on our podcast for this week. But he actually recorded something he wanted for everybody. And thanks for bringing that up. And that wasn't even orchestrated, so it was perfect timing to remind me. So I want the back office to play this little thing from Vinnie. Maybe.
So as well, we need experts like you, and we need your voice. And yeah, I can't make choir practice because I've got to go to work. But maybe what I'll do is share some stories on the air tonight that folks will enjoy. But you know, maybe someday if I'm on vacation, we'll make it to choir practice.
That'll be great. And folks, please watch for the podcast where I'm interviewing Vinnie and we're talking about his history, his background, and the incredible contribution that he's making to the Court TV family. So, Vinnie, thanks so much. God bless you, and all the best to your family. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care, Mike.
All right.
So what a great guy. And, you know, I think of people like that, Michelle. I think about you. You know, you don't have to do stuff like this. And it is just so neat that you would take time to do that. I want to open it up for some questions if anybody's got some questions tonight. And it looks like Joan's asking one. What's the funniest thing Mike has done? Oh man, Joan, that's a mean thing. Well, I can say that if I'm going to give the sheriff and Michelle a second to cover some things, and I'm going to think about whether I can tell one of these stories, and if not, I have another one that the only thing I've gotten with age is a little bit wiser. But Michelle, I mean, what kind of questions you got for the sheriff? And Joan, I'm going to come back to you. I'm not going to leave you hanging on that, but I'm going to give Michelle a minute to see what the sheriff has going on.
I'm really curious. I never got to see what was going on in Portland, but it sounded like absolute lawlessness, and the idea that you could have a contingency of civilians take over an entire city neighborhood where people were getting shot and the cops weren't allowed in, and this is all condoned by city officials. I mean, look, I live in LA. There's a lot going on here too that you could talk about, but that seemed completely out of control. What was it like to be there?
So, you know, you and I and Mike, we travel here and there, and we go different places, and you start to hear people talk, and you get a real quick and easy, not easy, but a real quick feel of what it's like. And the feeling that I got there was no support for law enforcement. When I say no, so I say less support. But the thing on the lawlessness is what that troubled me the most is I swore to an oath when I took this position to uphold and defend the Constitution. These leaders these cities that we're talking about, they have failed. They have not honored that oath, and that needs to change. I've seen that across the board, and so for some reason in their mind, and this is just my assumption, that there's a justification for the individual to act out and destroy because there's an injustice in their mind, and we'll let them go through their little episode of acting out. And what they don't realize is, you know, they swore to oath that any elected official, first priority and the biggest priority they have is to protect the residents of their city or county or United States. That's the first priority. And that was not honored. They did not do that. The interesting thing I learned about Portland is there's kind of a story on the protest that I learned, but I'll skip the beginning part. But when the businesses were attacked, it took the officers 3 days to get there. And when they got there, the business owner said, "What took you so long?" They then lost faith in their law enforcement. And I thought, oh man, and, because they were told not to go in, they created that inner city. And I mean, business is what keeps that economy going. And I can't understand it. I just don't get it. I can't reason with it. But that was their decision.
It happened right here in Santa Monica too. And Santa Monica is a very upscale community. I mean, it was looting. It was wild. There were pallets of bricks that were being dropped off on the corners. And, it was a stand down order, clearly. You could see that somebody had the guts to go in there and clean it up from the Santa Monica Police Department. There still hasn't really been any understanding of as to why. But the business owners were the ones that are suffering. It's almost a year later, and some of these places are still boarded up and done for good. It's like they wiped people out of business, including a charity that collected musical instruments for little kids that didn't have anything.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
Okay, Mike, here's that funny story. I can see you're still, should I?
All right, so here it is, and I don't know if it's funny or not, but it's always been funny to me. Is, Michelle, I've always had a really strong faith, and I my entire career, I had a rote prayer that every night I would just say, Heavenly Father, just help me to act quickly and correctly if I have to, and that on many occasions was a result, and I am grateful for that. But one night I was a brand new SWAT officer, and I was working under Sergeant Moore, Don Moore, who was a former Green Beret. And I mean, he was a demanding human being. And we had a call of a suicidal person, and he and I were sneaking through the backyards. And we had patrol officers out front, and the person was, saying they were going to kill themselves. And we were trying to get into a position where we could potentially take the person down. Well, he went into the backyard in the dark, and he had set up and had a ladder already set and a noose hanging in a tree. And he jumped up on the ladder, and he put the noose around his neck, and he kicked the ladder out and hung himself. And we didn't know all this had happened, but we were sneaking up, and it was so pitch black. I walked right into the guy, and you have this thing happens inside of you where you kind of squeal like a schoolgirl when you're frightened at times. And Sergeant Moore was like 6'4", and he ran over and he picked this guy up, and he reached, or I picked him up, and he reached up and cut the rope, and we got him on the ground, and the guy's on the ground. We took the rope off his neck, and he's laying there. And this is kind of morbid, but I mean, it's just police work, right, Sheriff? And I'm on one side of him, and Moore's on the other side, and we're both on our knees looking at him, and the guy's just laying there. And Don says, "Give him mouth to mouth." And I said, "You give him mouth to mouth." And he said, "King, me 3 stripe, you no stripe. You give him mouth to mouth." And so I have this moment where I'm thinking, oh, the heavens have got to help me here. And all of a sudden, the guy took this gasp of air. And Moore had given me grief my entire career about having faith. And he was always teasing me about being a church boy. And this guy took this breath of air, and I slapped Sergeant Moore on the shoulder, and I pointed at him. I said, "See, boss, the church is true." And I got up and walked away. And of course, he had a few things to say after that, but and we remained incredibly good friends. So that would be the one I felt was safe enough to talk about. Mom's Jeans and Crime Scenes. If you haven't been to her channel, folks, check out Mom's Jeans and Crime Scenes. $20 to the DP fond helping out the back office. And Sheriff Arbin, she actually lives in your community. So that is awesome. But what an honor it has been to have you both here. Sheriff, what kind of question you got for Michelle? I mean, how often do you get to put a reporter on the chopping block?
Well, for me, honestly, to have someone like Michelle here is huge. And there's one thing that I just, you think of all these questions, but there's always one that if you got one question, we have somebody so important, so valued, and such a rich, awesome history. What's some advice you would give us?
Oh, wow, Sheriff, you just put me on the hook. It's funny. It's we all talk about prayers, and I definitely don't have the level of deep faith that you have. But the very first guy to die on 9/11 was the FDNY fire chaplain, the Reverend Michael Judge, and they're trying to canonize him right now. And I really hope that he becomes a saint because he's deserving of it. He was funny and garrulous and helped a ton of guys and just an all-around good human being. And I'm sure people out there have seen that photo of him being carried to a chapel by, and anyone in NYPD knows this, ESU and the FDNY are brawlers. Like, they come to a scene, they fight over it. There's a fisticuff every single time. You can't go to any sporting event where those two are going to be together, the ESU and FDNY, because there'll be a fist fight. But they together carried Reverend Michael Judge, and he had a prayer, and I try to stick to this in my life in all areas, even as I burgeon into a new career. God, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say and keep me out of your way.
That is awesome.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen Frostheiser, thank you. That's very kind. Michelle, actually someone put up a question. I don't quite understand it, but I feel like we need to ask it. And that is, who paid for the bricks?
That's a good question. I think that the answer lies somewhere with, does Antifa exist? Or is it a myth, that storyline?
Interesting.
The pallets of bricks, you saw them a lot in LA. And it is interesting how they got there, who dropped them off, and who paid for them, more importantly. It's like the info wars. Who knows who did it? What they're trying to do is create division. And I think a lot of this division is manipulated and orchestrated by outside influences that you just don't know where those outside influences come from.
Yeah, I would agree.
The tactic right out of Russia, divide and conquer.
I would agree. As you were talking about the chaplain, I was thinking of Lieutenant Joyce talking about taking his squad and walking into ground zero on the morning that the towers fell. And I remember as they passed that little church, and I don't even remember the name of the little tiny, I think it's a little Episcopal church. It's about 2 blocks northeast of the World Trade Center. You know which one I'm talking about. It's that just really old little church on the southwest corner.
What was weird about that church is when the towers came down and I was there, it was unscathed.
Yeah.
Everything was covered in a miasma of dust and debris and people screaming in chaos, but this place was strangely untouched and almost pristine.
Yeah. And I remember Tommy talking about as they walked by, the priest just coming out and just putting his hand on his shoulder for just a second as he headed in. And Sheriff, I mean, we see that from the faith community. We watched you and your team give away truckloads of food a few months ago with the Utah farmers. Michelle, it was the most amazing thing. There were literally cars backed up for a mile trying to get in to get this free food. And the faith community was there. And, there are really good people. And we just need to quit focusing on all the stupid stuff and focus on all the really good stuff that's happening and the good people that are out there.
Mike, that's why this is such a great show. And that's why I always say yes when I can, because I think you put good energy out into the world. And I think more people need to do that.
Well, we're all awfully blessed. Chef Betsy, thank you so much. The request is, will you both come back?
Absolutely. Are you kidding? I love the sheriff already. He's fantastic.
He
Yeah,
actually
I
he
would
is
love-
fantastic.
Well, thank you, but I feel like the one that's got the biggest reward is to have be on the same time and slot with Michelle. You're awesome. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Sheriff. Honestly, so it's always fun, and I appreciate you guys both. I appreciate what you're doing right now, Sheriff. It's a tough time to do it, and for you and everybody out there that's put into harm's way on a daily basis, you are appreciated by a lot more people than I think cops know.
Yeah,
You're right. They call it the
Sheriff.
silent majority. I wish that silent majority was a little louder, but you're right. There's so much more that support us. Yep. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you know what? I want to try to give away one more book. We have one more book to give away. So if the back office could do the drawing, and actually they got some kind of really cool software, I guess, that somehow goes through and hits it up. But let's see who won the last book. And I want to just again thank Michelle McPhee for being gracious enough to give these books out. Michelle, we got to talk about Mob Over Miami sometime. I have emailed you, I think 3 times asking you to give me the goods on Gotti, but you're not giving it up yet. And I want to know why.
Well, I have to tell you, Mike, you know that the story I was going to tell if you asked me about Boston is the time that I got a gun pointed to my head after I wrote my very first story on a mob massacre in 1995. I'll send you the story. And that story, but everything happens for a reason if you have good karma, I think. And that story got me hired at the New York Daily News, and that's how I ended up at 1PP. But I got threatened at that point. It was a story about that big mob massacre. I'm like, I'm never writing about the mob again. My very first day at the New York Daily News as a rookie reporter was McPhee, Boston girl, get out to Howard Beach. John Gotti Jr. just got locked up. And I was like, oh no. And that story I wrote about him, he had like this is when the feds was so focused on taking down Gotti, they missed 9/11, many argue, but they were trying to get him, and he had horse tranquilizers that he was bringing to his brother-in-law who owned a bunch of horses, racehorses. So he gets locked up. I get a phone call saying you have to come down to the club, the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, and hear my side of the story. And he didn't think I would do it because no one ever had. Right? And everybody was like, I'm not going to John Gotti's club to go listen to his side of the stories, but I did it. And we became friends that day. And now, literally 25 years later, we're working on a docu-series together about rogues. There's so many people who are hidden in the witness protection program that do terrible, awful things that are out from under the public's eye. Utah is like my blue heaven when it comes to rats. Utah and Arizona is rat heaven. And I'm sure they never consult with you before they drop some maniac in the middle of your town either.
I was never consulted when Mike was dropped on my town, and I don't know what to do.
Although from where we started, I think he was in the 3rd grade when I was dropped in. So, no, we've had so many amazing things, and I just sent the back office a picture of you with John Gotti, Michelle, and that just cracked me up when I saw that. I don't know if I'll have time to put it up, but here we go. There we go. and I want you to know, Sheriff, I tried every trick in the book to get her to give it up, but it took till tonight to give it up. So
the sheriff is
cool.
Investigative techniques right there.
Right.
I guess so. Well, let's see. Did we give that last book away? I don't think we did. Let's see if we got a name back there for the last book. We'll give that away, and we'll call it a night. And I don't know, have either of you been able to listen to the Mapping Evil podcast? If not, don't even answer. If not, you ought to go and listen to that. The thing that's so fun is it's an Australian broadcaster and me talking about cases in the United States and in Australia that have similarities. And so it's wonderful because who doesn't love to listen to an Aussie talk? And that darn thing went to number 5 in Australia in the first week that it was that we started the broadcast. So it's been really fun to do that. And then, of course, folks, make sure you're hitting Profiling Evil podcasts. And the book winner, Diane Brazil, please email immediately profilingevil@gmail.com so we can get that mailed out to you. And if the back office happens to have it, let's pull up a picture of my book, Deceived, and just an invitation. If you haven't gotten it, please consider picking up Deceived. And you can get it. You can just go to profilingevil.com and get it there. We really appreciate it. We actually, Sheriff, we're gonna be talking pretty soon to the Children's Justice Center. That this was the first case they handled as a justice center 30 years ago, and it's been awesome to see them grow. So that's great. But Michelle McPhee, thank you so much. Sheriff Ryan Arbin, thank you. To the Utah Sheriff's Association, thank you. Actually, Sheriff Rivera from Salt Lake County reached out, Ryan, to talk about one of their cold cases, and we'll be talking about that soon. And so yeah, really, really neat. But from all of us at Profiling Evil, just want to wish you the very best. We're going to see you back here soon. And to everybody on tonight, thanks so much for your support. Please go to Amazon.com and get Michelle McPhee's books. You can just type in her name. There's like 8, Michelle, right?
7, but
7.
3 there.
7.
Yeah.
So please get them. And the next time we have Michelle on, I think we're going to talk about Mob Over Miami and get a little more insight into John Gotti. And wouldn't that be cool? You think you could bring Gotti's son on to talk about the mob a little?
I bet you he could. You know, he's a very interesting guy. He's kind of a self-taught lawyer, and he has some interesting perspectives that I think are law enforcement worthy. And he'd be the first one to say he's a bad guy who did his time. But I think he has some interesting perspectives about how, you know, both sides have to walk an ethical line.
Well, we'll get him on. Instead of popcorn, we'll do spaghetti, and we'll have a great time together. So thank you so much, you two. I really appreciate it. To everyone from Profiling Evil, thanks. And to the back office, thanks so much for all you do. Have a great evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See ya.